The second serve can be a very challenging stroke. So in this video, I want to give you a few technical tips that you can practice to make that second serve into something that you're actually going to be wanting to be hitting rather than running away from it. So a while ago, I made a video where I gave a few tips on how to train your mind so that that second serve doesn't become so challenging. So I'm going to link it up here, and it would be really good for you to listen to that so that you can apply those plus the tips that I'm going to give you today. So the first suggestion, and I believe the most important, is you have to learn how to loosen up your hand and how to really take advantage of the speed that you can generate with your hand. You can generate speed with your shoulder and with your elbow, with any joint, but your hand is shorter and much quicker and has a lot more bones than the rest of those joints. So you really want to try to spend some time teaching your hand how to move fast. And how do you teach your hand to relax? By learning to loosen up your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder. Now, I believe the main reason why it is so hard for a lot of people to loosen up the hand is because they haven't spent the time disconnecting that fast motion from the shoulder. So in essence, what they're doing is just speeding up the serve by using this joint rather than using this joint. Now, knowing that fact is not enough because your body has basically created a habit where it speeds up everything from the shoulder. And I've gone through the same thing with many strokes in the past where I knew that what I wanted to do was use my hand, but my shoulder kept going. So you have to be really patient with your body and repeat things a few times. Repeat them slowly so that you can eventually disconnect the shoulder from the hand and allow the wrist to be that joint that gives you the speed that allows the hand to snap, to slice, to do things really quickly. So be patient with your body and go slowly. You don't want to be hurting yourself in the beginning. My second tip has to do with your toss, and more precisely, how you want to be grabbing that ball. So the less joints that you invite into that motion, the better. So we have 3 joints in your arm. We have the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder, right? So ideally, we just want to be using the shoulder to toss. But if you're grabbing the ball this way, guess what? You're allowing that wrist to participate. So we don't want that to happen. So I want you to try to consider grabbing the ball as if you were holding a cup so that when it goes up, you're still going to have a little mobility in your wrist, but it's not going to be as easy as this. And you're not going to have 5 fingers wanting to give you direction. So ideally, this is what you want to do. So practice a few times. Start with the toss by itself. And when you toss up, this is the joint that is going to allow the motion. You're going to be dragging that ball by using the shoulder. And don't think about a toss, think about dragging the ball. So my arm is going to keep moving, and at some point, I'm going to release the ball. And this is not a motion that requires speed. This needs to remain at the same speed the entire time. Okay? So eventually, once you have that, then you want to try to join it with your right arm. So there is symmetry. Okay? So both arms are going to go in opposite directions, and then they're going to go up. And while the left arm is up, then you're going to start doing your motion with the right arm. Take a few practice and go very, very slow in the beginning. So remember, both arms are going to go up, and that means that right elbow also needs to go up. My next tip has to do with timing. And as I always tell you in the majority of my videos, everything in tennis needs to go from slow to fast. And the serve is no different. We want to try to go fast at the very end. And the very end of the stroke is actually once the racket has positioned itself behind the ball and it's starting to spin. In this case, we're talking about the second serve, so we're going to be spinning from the back to the right side of the ball to the front, and we're going to go back. So this motion, as you're spinning the ball, that's what needs to go fast. So ideally, from here to here, things are going to start accelerating. But once you're positioned here, your hand that has learned how to loosen up because the wrist is loose and you're disconnecting from the shoulder, the hand is basically going to speed up on the way down and on the way to your left. My next tip has to do with picturing in your mind what it is that you're doing to the ball in order to create that spin. And we're talking about slice for that second serve. So ideally, what we want to do is we want to try to go from having that racket as if it was a hammer and it was going to go up. And as it's going up, we're going to try to start opening up. Because what happens when you're pronating is that your hand is going to get ready to spin the ball. So that's why a lot of people have such a hard time creating spin, because they have the wrong grip. So the typical frying pan grip. So we want to make it hard on yourself by using that continental grip, because eventually your hand is going to start looking for comfort. So ideally, what we want to do to that ball is we're going to start aiming for the back of the ball, and we're going to try to feel like you're brushing it towards the right side, and then eventually towards the front of the ball, and eventually towards the back. And at the end, we're going to try to finish with the tip of the racket pointing to the back fence. So you're going to be looking for your left pocket if you're a righty, and that tip of the racket is going to go back to the back fence. My next tip has to do with looking at two very important parts of the racket, the tip and the bottom, and telling yourself exactly what it is that you want to be doing with each one of those parts. So ideally, the bottom of the racket needs to be the anchor for all your spins. So when the racket gets to the top, this part needs to control the motion. You're not creating motion with the bottom of the racket. The forward momentum is going to go with the whole racket. But ideally, what we want to be doing is creating that spin, that direction with the tip of the racket. So when you start serving, then think about making the majority of the motion with your tip. So your tip is going to start pointing down to the ground. Then you're going to pick up your tip. Then the tip is going to point down to the court. And then the tip is going to go up. And the tip is what's going to go from the back of the ball to the right of the ball to the front of the ball towards the left pocket and towards pointing to the back of the fence. So when you go practice, take each one of these tips and practice them separately. Don't join them all together at first, because your mind is going to get really confused. This leads me to my next tip. So after we have taught the hand what it needs to be doing, then we need to think about your arm, and we need to tell your arm that it needs to be giving the ball a hug. The last thing that you want to do is having the back of your arm completely touching your pectoral muscles. You want distance between your chest and your arm. So as you're up here and you're slicing that ball, you really want to try to picture that you have a big beach ball right between your chest and your arm. And so that the motion becomes a circular motion rather than a line going forward and a line going down. That's not what we want to do. We want to think about circles as you're spinning and as you're coming around. So after you've gotten that hand to relax and that arm to give the ball a big hug, then it's time for our bodies to participate and help you finish the stroke. So if you're a righty, then your right side is going to be dominant, right? Because whichever side is closest to the ball, that should dominate because it's the nearest side to the ball. So as I'm finishing the stroke, I need to start telling my hip and my right leg and my right foot, we need to start turning around so that it feels like my body is now adding a little bit of follow through. And that follow through doesn't need to be really fast. The distance between here and the service box is not that big. And we all agree that the main concern is not that we don't have enough power to get it in that box. The main concern is that we have way too much power. So I would say the main concern for us is to try to create some sort of deceleration by accelerating that hand when it goes through the slice. And that leads me to my last tip, which is using your core, becoming very aware of the function of your core. And what is the main function of your core? Control. Think of your core as the brakes of that engine, that machine that you have, which is your body. So right as you're making contact and you're going to accelerate, you're going to go really, really fast. That's when your core needs to tighten up so that you can control that rotation. And ideally, what goes from right to left is your arm, not your entire body. You want to try to stop your body from spinning around. So my last tip is practice makes perfect. Go ahead and grab a basket. Promise yourself that you're going to try and practice that serve at least once a week. And like I told you in the beginning, take every tip and spend some time on each tip separately. Do not put them all together for the first times when you go practice. Just master each tip in the very beginning and then use them when you're playing. We can all become masters of practice, but you really need to use these tips when it matters, when it's going to cost you something, when you feel that it's going to be painful if you miss. That's when it really matters. As I always say, you have to be willing to put everything on the line in order to change something, to change a habit.